of working on the Sabbath. Jesus said to the man with the deformed hand, "Come and stand in front of everyone." Then he turned to his critics and asked, "Does the law permit good deeds on the Sabbath, or is it a day for doing evil? Is this a day to save life or to destroy it?" But they wouldn't answer him. He looked around at them angrily and was deeply saddened by their hard hearts. Then he said to the man, "Hold out your hand." So the man held out his hand, and it was restored. At once the Pharisees went away and met with the supporters of Herod to plot how to kill Jesus. Hear what the Spirit is saying to the church.
And thanks be to God. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen.
Amen.
Be seated. Today we hear a wonderful story about Sabbath that has all kinds of interesting parts to it. Sabbath day and what it is. We know that the Jewish people celebrate the Sabbath on Saturday, and we do it on Sunday. The Sabbath day for the Jewish people was the seventh day because God created the world in 6 days according to the story in Genesis, and the seventh day he rested. And for us Christians, it's a kind of a mini Easter every Sunday because Jesus died and was raised on the first day of the week. And we've had many arguments over the 2,000 years about what day we're supposed to celebrate, and there are some denominations that say everything would be all right. Heaven and earth would match up perfectly, but we're practicing our Sabbath on the wrong day, so it's never going to work until we change that. And so they've changed it. But we still haven't got the perfect world, have we? And we're more in need of Sabbath than we ever have been. Jesus goes with his disciples walking along beside the grain fields, and they're hungry, and so they grab a few sheaves of wheat and start pulling off, and they're separating the wheat from the chaff to eat. And the Pharisees, who are the leaders of the religious order, come to tell Jesus that they are breaking the Sabbath. There are these many rules that have been made up over the years, and there are many, many rules about what you can and cannot do, and they are the rule-oriented people. The Pharisees often get a bad rap. Actually, they were interested in conversation and argumentation about how things should be. But in this case, the story tells us that they were out to get him. And we all know, I'm sure, from some life experience somewhere in our life, that if they're out to get you, they're out to get you, and it doesn't make any difference. You can't defend yourself in those situations. But Jesus does a pretty good job of explaining in front of everyone what it is they're wrong about. He said the Sabbath was made for humanity, for humankind, not humankind for the Sabbath. In other words, God didn't set up a bunch of rules for the sake of keeping us in line. We never understand that. We don't even understand that 10 Commandments are a gift. These things do not do. And if you do not do these things, then you're going to be happy. God wants us to have a joyful and beautiful life. The commandments are about that. So we're to consider the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Not for God's sake. God doesn't need that. It's for us. And the Jewish people at the time of Jesus did understand that the Sabbath was needed. And they understood it better than most of us, but maybe not all of us, because I don't know how many of you work 7 days a week, but it's getting to be like that for many people. There are many people in our culture right now that don't get a day off. And even if they do get a day off, they work maybe 2 or 3 jobs on the other 5 or 6 days, and they're so exhausted they can't have a Sabbath of joy, of relaxation. Sabbath is a gift from God for our happiness. So Jesus says, they see his disciples eating this grain, and he says the Sabbath is a gift for people. It isn't intended to keep us down or to criticize us or to make us stand in line. Now, I wonder how many of you don't need to put your hand up, are old enough to remember when everything was closed on Sunday. Oh, I'm getting a laugh, so one or two. Even you, Martha?
I remember the big controversy. Sunday shopping.
Oh yeah, it's not that long ago.
Well, when I was a child, we don't know what year, whatever year it was, it probably in different places, depending on where you lived. I was in Winnipeg as a child, and everything was closed on Sunday, and so I guess that's maybe not the reason I went to church, but it didn't hurt, because at church at least there was something going on, something interesting. And I'm a big shopper, so Saturday was my day. And I remember thinking, oh, if the stores would only be open on Sunday. And I couldn't really afford to buy anything, but I like to go and look at it. And now I can do that on Sunday if I want to. Now everything's a blur, isn't it? We don't have that. Now we can't go back into the past and start making a bunch of rules about it. But that's not really up to the government, is it, whether we have a Sabbath or not? That's up to us. Sabbath is something that happens because we choose to have Sabbath. Maybe we're doing it because God asked us to do it, but either way, whatever reason we're doing it, we need to take a Sabbath. So I have to confess that the worst proponent of that is you-know-who. Not that I'm such a person who's working all the time, but it gets blurry. I think, so this, a lot of our sermons are for us. Wouldn't you say a lot of them are for us? We don't always admit that. Sometimes, I can admit this one. But if we can't take a day, we can take an hour. And even if we're not specifically being spiritual, God just wants us to rest. Take a moment. And I learned this this last week. I went to my daughter's wedding. I was all riled up. I traveled. I was all riled up. Everything related to the wedding and the barbecue the next day and being with the relatives, and all was exciting and exciting. No rest, no rest, no rest. And then I went to be with my 3 Lutheran pastor friends. And I'd like to say we did this for religious reasons. But I think it just maybe had something to do with our age. But the 4 of us rested the whole time we were together. And we were able to have that Sabbath rest time for 3.5 days, non-stop. And I discovered that I felt like a different person. They say in that movie, Eat, Pray, Love. I'd like to say that's what we did. I'm sure we were praying quietly on our own. And we did a lot of eating. And there was a lot of love. But I would say it was eat, rest, nap, love. There was a lot of, in the afternoon, one of us, and it was, I don't think I ever did it, but one of us every time would say, I know what we can do. Let's take a nap. Take a nap. I guess I'm really old. When you're with your friends that you never see and you take a nap. And so we all each went to our bed and just, I don't know how long we napped. Doesn't matter. And then we got up and then we were just happy. And as the days passed, I became what is probably the real me. I'm not sure, because on the way home there was so much fuss with the airplanes and buses and cars and I got in at 4 o'clock in the morning, so I'm right back to the old person that I was before. Sorry about that. But I learned something. I learned that, well, it reminded me, and then this passage is here for us this exact time when I personally needed it the most, and I'm sure all of you can use it. Try an hour of peace. Try an hour of not worrying about the world, troubles of the world. It's okay. Eat something you like. Take a nap. I'm sure we can all find time for that. Because that is the gift of God that we're hearing about today. Jesus is telling the Pharisees, this Sabbath was not made for a bunch of rules that you can't. What were all the things we couldn't do? I don't know, my house wasn't really like that. I had friends that they weren't allowed to play cards on Sunday, right? You couldn't dance around the house even alone on Sunday. What else could you not do?
Drink.
Drink? Oh, no. No, people didn't drink on Sunday. But so many things. That's right. What was that?
No sports.
Sports. Now it's only sports, right? But this is the gift that God gave us. I would say that Sabbath is for restoration. Sabbath is for renewal. Can you think of any words?
Refreshment.
Sabbath is for refreshment,
Rejuvenate.
rejuvenation, revival,
Revival.
coming back to life and finding out who we're supposed to be, who we really are. What a beautiful gift Jesus gives us here. And all he's doing is reminding the Pharisees, who are the leaders, that they have forgotten the purpose of this. Because in the Old Testament, way back, and he knew his Bible, it said on the Sabbath day, if your ox or your cow or whatever it is, your animal, falls into a pit, pull it out. Don't leave it there to suffer. And so Jesus says to the man with the withered hand, stretch out your hand. And he heals him, because Sabbath is a time for healing. This heals our souls, it heals our bodies, it heals our community. Your time that you spend quietly, even alone in your room, or someplace out in the nature, and maybe there's nobody even there, is healing the universe. This is very powerful. This is the power of the love of God, and one of the greatest gifts that God has given us. Let us find time for Sabbath. Sabbath rest. Amen.